Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good evening in New Zealand, and kind of good end of afternoon in Australia. My name is Chris Hart, and I am your host for this evening's webinar, for which I am very, very excited to spend a bit of time with a gentleman that I met last year, I think it was, when we were traveling around New Zealand, from St. Patrick's College in Wellington. And Doug, just to let you know that we are looking at a whole school approach to Chromebooks and the incredible story at St. Patrick's, which Doug has been a key part of, along with both the staff and students and parents, I guess, as well at St. Patrick's. So I'm going to just share my screen and jump onto the slideshow to get us going. I'm looking forward to sharing a few tips with you as well, and then Doug is going to share his story. As usual, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the live chat. I keep looking to the side, that's because I'm looking at my other monitor to look at the live chat. Feel free to put your questions in there. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll give Doug some time towards the end of the webinar to answer questions, but also if there's anything super pertinent in between time, I might well interrupt Doug and ask him to answer questions at that time. Doug, do you just want to pop on your video so we can see your lovely face before we get going? Because I can see he set firing to, what is that thing? You've set fire to your hands on your...
Oh, that's a methane bubbles experiment.
That looks like a lot of fun. So Doug, I will introduce you formally in a minute or so, but I'm going to share my screen now and get started with the webinar. So share that screen. Alrighty. So there we go. As I mentioned, this is going to be a webinar all about the whole school approach to integrating Chromebooks. And Doug, who is a senior leader and head of science at St. Patrick's College in Wellington, and my name is Chris from Unstuck Learning Design, who delighted to be the host for this evening. So a quick agenda. We've got introductions and updates, top tips, our digital journey from St. Patrick's, and then some Q&A. So let's get going with some updates. Number one, and super important update, is some upcoming webinars. We are absolutely delighted to continue into the next 3 months to provide you with what we hope are really fascinating webinars around, in particular, the use of G Suite for education and Chromebooks as a wonderful tool. And the best way really to access G Suite for education. So on the 27th of April at 6 p.m, we have got Classroom as mission control. So if you're interested in looking at how you can use Classroom really as a central learning and teaching platform for your students, and please feel free to join me then. You will receive an email with the links to register for these webinars. And then on the 18th of May, we're actually going back to New Zealand. And we're going to spend a little bit of time with Mr. Peterson from Bombay School in New Zealand, who has done some incredible work in quite a rural school, increasing access to technology and improving learning outcomes. And then on the 15th of June, at 6 p.m. Australian time, 8 p.m. New Zealand time, we will be looking at empowering learners in a Chromebook school, in particular at Amaru School in the ACT, who have a wonderful approach to using technology in their Chromebooks, and a brilliant team of children called the Aztecs, who not only support the technology, but actually ideate and prototype and build some incredible solutions for the school. So yeah, we're really excited to have quite a varied menu of webinars coming up for you. So first update, oh sorry, that was the first update. Second update, this is a really interesting one. From Google Classroom. You may have heard on the Google blog that Google Classroom will now be accessible by people with a Gmail account, so a non-G Suite account. Now, so you can imagine that could be really useful for a group of homeschool children who want to communicate and work together, or for community groups who are doing learning together, or not-for-profits, for example, who are doing some learning together. Obviously, as schools, and I guess the majority of people who come along to these webinars are educators and IT administrators and things within education. So for you guys, it doesn't really make a huge difference. It's part of G Suite, and you will continue to use Classroom within the G Suite instance. But for those kids who maybe are joining you virtually, or kids who are, for example, on exchange for a few weeks, you would be able to allow them to access Classroom without necessarily having them put into your domain. So a really nice little update for us on Google Classroom, which keeps getting better and better. And I look forward next month to sharing some more exciting ideas around how to use Classroom to enhance learning. So I am going to share a top tip before I go across to Doug and we hear about his fantastic story at St. Patrick's. I want to talk just for a few minutes about graphic organizers. Now, I'm going to show you a slide deck, and I've put the link to this slide deck in the description below the actual live video stream that you guys are watching. So feel free to make a copy of this. But I love using graphic organizers because we talk about, and that guy, Professor John Hattie, talks a lot about making learning visible, and graphic organizers are definitely one way that we can do that. So a graphic organizer, as you guys know, is just something like a Venn diagram or a way of children really manipulating information and organizing kind of intellectual and mental schemas in their heads, I guess. So I love them and have used them for many, many years, but often it's about you printing out a piece of paper or something like that and getting the kids to use that paper to organize their thoughts. But I have been using and have used for a while now Google Slides to do that, and for two reasons. The first reason, obviously, is the collaboration aspect, which is wonderful for kids to be able to collaborate together in a Google Slide and actually work, especially in a one-to-one environment with Chromebooks. You know, they can work collaboratively in the class, and they can work on one slide. So, for example, we might have a Venn diagram, and I might to get them to classify plants. So they would just go and they would get a text box, and I would add that in, and I would say, in fact, we'll do fruits. So tomato, and then I might do another text box, just drop it in here, and I might do carrot, and then we'll do another text box, and I'll put it over here, and I might do apple. And so what I would do is I would actually create a slide, and I would probably add the text boxes myself, and then I would share the slide with the kids, and I would get them to move this around. So if we imagine the left-hand circle is fruits and the right-hand circle is vegetables, I might go, okay, carrot's going to go over here, apple is going to go over here, and then tomato might be, this is the discussion where we can say, like, what is it? Is tomato a fruit or is it a vegetable? And I believe the definition of wisdom, in fact, is knowing that a tomato is in fact a fruit, but never putting it into a fruit salad. So you know, you can create this, and it's great for kids to actually be able to manipulate some ideas here. You can create a simple three-part Venn diagram. But when I'm thinking about the digital technology curriculum, which is coming up, which is in fact indeed launched in Australia and certainly coming up very quickly next year for New Zealand, I believe. Lots of schools are preparing for it now. One of the things that you have to do in digital technologies is to learn how to use flowcharts. So this is my favorite flowchart. It's start, is it about the 90s? No, then stop. If it is about the 90s, yes, stop, hammer time, collaborate, and listen. So if you are a fan of 90s music, obviously you are rolling on the floor laughing at the moment. But this idea of actually getting kids to create flowcharts in Google Slides is a really nice way for us to, again, make their learning visible, because I can be in the slide deck. I can have the slide deck up on my projector and see what the kids are doing and how they're learning. So for example, I might give them this and say, okay, create me a flowchart of what happens when your alarm rings in the morning. So we have alarm rings, and then we say, okay, ready to get up. So we might put that there, and then that's a decision. So they start to learn about the shapes of the boxes within flowcharts having meanings. And in fact, if you go into insert a shape up here and hover over these, it actually tells you flowchart processes, flowchart decision, flowchart data. It actually tells you the different meanings of the shapes, which is really useful. So I'll do alarm rings, ready to get up, and then they need to make a decision. So no. In fact, let's pick that up. So they might say no, and put that arrow going that way. And I can put a delay. So as you know, this weird shape here is a delay. And then if they say yes, so click that snooze button. And then if they say yes, then we can Do that like that. They can climb out of bed in tears. So this idea that they then need to add in some arrows, so we can actually do some curved lines as well, or even a scribble. So click snooze button. There we go. So they can actually draw in some lines in between these things and create their flowcharts. Now, the great thing about this, obviously, is that you can easily replicate that slide so that you could have say you've got 30 students in the class and you want them working collaboratively. You could create 15 copies of that slide, have them working in pairs, and you can see all of them. So this is the final thing I'm going to share with you, is this idea here of hexagonal thinking. So this is just a kind of thing I've done with some maths where I get kids to look at this bunch of information and I say to them, okay, which pizza should I buy? And if you don't need to read all this information, but it's essentially making a choice between a 24-inch margarita pizza or two 12-inch margarita pizzas. And essentially what I get the kids to do is start moving hexagons and matching things up. So I might say, well, this is all about maths, and move these over here. This is about price, and move them over there, and then they can start coloring them in. So the maths ones, they might actually color in green. So they're going through all of those higher order thinking skills of sorting through information, organizing it into groups, and then trying to infer meaning as well. But what I do is I do 30 of these, or 15 if I'm working in pairs, and just put a number 1, so that's group 1, and do it in green in the right-hand corner. So when we start, let's just say to the kids, okay, guys, you're all in the same slide deck, and we're just going to grab a slide. And once you've grabbed that slide, you're just going to change the color of your group number so everyone knows that slide has been taken. And often you can get them to put their names on the slide as well. So yeah, it's a really, really easy way to use slides and make it very, very visible. So graphic organizers helping us in Google Slides, helping us to make learning super visible, have them up on the projector, and so we can go through, and then as we go through, you can see what kids are doing. You can stop them and then say, okay, can you now explain to me what you've done and explain your thinking? So yes, very, very quick top tip on using graphic organizers. So anyway, back to the really important stuff, which is Doug's story. So I shall introduce him. He has a beautiful photo here. Doug Walker is on the senior leadership team of St. Patrick's College and is the head of science there. I am actually going to drop out of my screen share now, hand over to Doug, and he's going to take you through the rest of the slideshow. So Doug, you are up.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, folks. I'm Doug. I really like some of that stuff on the graphic organizers. I'm just thinking how I can use that over the next few days. So I'm not particularly tech savvy, nor do I claim to be a fantastic digital educator. But hopefully I can share our story and generate some ideas or alert you to some challenges. Hopefully I can guide you through about 3 or 4 years of our digital change and do it without rushing. Here's St. Pat's. We're situated in Wellington, New Zealand, founded in 1885. I think we're the oldest Catholic boys' school in New Zealand. State integrated secondary, about 830 students. And we're decile 8, which means we tend to be towards the top end of the socioeconomic spectrum, but we do have a large contingent of refugees and families from very low socioeconomic backgrounds as well. So picture the year 2013, Edward Snowden shakes the world, a new pope is elected, civil war rages in Syria, and it was my first year at St. Pat's. When I arrived, we had 2 computer rooms, wired internet that was incredibly slow, 1 laptop trolley, about half of which were operational on any given day, 2 iPad trolleys, 1 overworked and underappreciated IT technician. Our student management system was Muzak, for those of you that are familiar with them in New Zealand, and our learning management system was KnowledgeNet. Our staff love them to bits, and they'll agree with me on this. We were largely Luddites and technophobes, and I tried to come up with an image to get that across, and this was what I managed to come up with. Our initial exposure to Google Apps was a Google Doc for our relief register and Google Sheets for our daily notices, both of which are used every day and they're still in use. By March 2013, all students had their own Google Drive and Gmail accounts. We had some ministry PD and a rector who was keen to move forwards with BYOD. I think he was keen to leave a bit of a legacy. The intention was to begin BYOD in 2014. And my memory of some of that PD was a whole staff session investigating the pros and cons of different devices. It was a great idea, but it felt artificial, like we were being led towards a preordained decision. What did come out of it was that Chromebooks had a short startup time, long battery life, and a relatively low cost. At another whole staff session, a questionnaire was used, but the questions, both in their language and style, completely frustrated and alienated staff. The PD at that stage and involving the staff could have been done a lot better. The problem was we had staff who'd never had a class in front of them all on devices before, and we were asking them questions that relied on that sort of level of understanding. At a committee meeting later in the year, myself and another HOD pointed out that we were on the bridge to nowhere. We lacked infrastructure and needed some serious time for PD and development before we were anywhere near ready. As a result, BYOD was postponed while professional development and the SNUP project to upgrade the network, a wireless network and internet speed could be completed. And that was the best decision ever. 2014, we got a new rector, an experienced gentleman called Neil Swindells from St. John's in Hastings. Our frustrations with KnowledgeNet led to it being disused in favour of far more useful tools. We bought a trolley of Chromebooks with a portable router to get staff and students experienced with Chromebooks. And we soon encountered a problem as a few very enthusiastic staff used our Google Calendar to book the Chromebooks weeks or even terms in advance, some of them even extending into the summer holidays. This prevented others from developing their skills and getting practice. Our first Wi-Fi routers were installed throughout the college, still had massive areas of blackout. It was very piecemeal at that stage. And we continued to upskill staff. We had some experimentation with Hapara Teacher Dashboard. We started using Google Forms and Google Sheets in quite a large way. I will say about Hapara Highlights that at that stage, letting teachers simultaneously see small windows of each student's active screen gave many staff the confidence to feel in control, and that helped them on the journey. I remember being on PD 30 kilometers away and checking Hapara during a tea break and finding some of my students gaming, and being able to close their tabs remotely and message them felt really powerful. Our IT technician was replaced by Norcom, which was a pretty fundamental decision in the grand scheme of things. And we expanded our senior leadership team. I was appointed to one of those positions, and it gave me a lot greater insight into the decision-making processes for the college and quite a lot more say in those decisions. So just about halfway through 2014, most departments began planning for having year 9s with devices the following year, or year 9s with Chromebooks, I should say. The ability, expanding our ability to collaborate digitally was a game changer. There were significant concerns around classroom management and being intimidated by new technology for a lot of the staff. It was around this time, sitting at home in my office late on a Saturday night, that I found myself marking some student work on Google Docs. And I opened up one to find one of my students, George, busily working away. And it was a wonderful experience to see his text appear on the screen while I was writing feedback for him. And it's a memory that I think I'll always remember. Following a PD day with Mike Redding, a Google Apps educator, the use of Google Apps was increasing and started to permeate daily life at the college. We started using Google Docs for department agendas and minutes, as well as collaborative schemes of work and tests. In Google Drive, the importance of naming conventions became obvious. Karen Clark, a very gifted and talented librarian, became a certified Google educator. During a stint as acting AP, I shifted our course information booklet to a Google Doc so that all of the departments could feed into one document simultaneously. And we used Google Forms to complete course selection. That massively reduced admin work around that particular task. We initiated an e-lead team, a passionate and skilled team of educators that advised decision-making and introduced new ideas to the college, as well as leading workshop-based PD. We were introduced to Kahoot, Google Forms, Google Classroom. Google Classroom was started off by, I remember 2 staff came to talk to me about it and thinking, oh, you know, this is another thing I'm going to have to figure out. But we gave it a go and it spread like wildfire. It's incredibly easy to set up, and I'll speak a bit more about how we used Classroom later. Calendar became our main booking system. So we ended up having devices, rooms, the gym, the hall, science practicals on there. And it's an integral part of our daily life now. We bought a FortiGate, which is a bit of hardware that deals with network security and filtering and managing the Wi-Fi network and student-owned devices. And this began our moral dilemma between educating or controlling appropriate use of devices. And that'll become a bit more apparent as I go through. Our senior leadership team met with potential providers to get the Chromebooks for the start of 2015. We met with Norcom, Noel Leeming, and Harvey Norman. And the influential factors that led to our decision were payment not being handled by the school, having a variety of payment options for our families, having loan devices, and at the time, a 3-year warranty on Acer devices, Chromebooks. Unfortunately, it did come with some empty promises, something perhaps to learn from. We ran an information evening for parents outlining the reasons and practical considerations around the move to Chromebooks. It wasn't that well attended. Later, we ran an information evening around cyber safety for parents and demonstrating and involving the parents in how students were using the Chromebooks. That was very productive, and it's something that we've continued. The parent feedback from that was phenomenal. We decided it would be a good idea to have some informal PD, you know, drop in, and these were instigated after school in our library. You know, come along, see a few ideas, ask specific questions that are relevant to yourself, or get a bit of training. The numbers vary, but it's a great vibe, and we try to do 1 or 2 a term. I'm very grateful to Karen, our librarian, for her help in maintaining this and preparing for the sessions. We use this time to let staff play with Chromebooks and set up mock student accounts and see how things appear from the student's perspective. At our last wine and cheese just a couple of weeks ago, you know, just talking around between ourselves, we discovered the power of Control, Shift, and T as a shortcut. If you're ever walking around the classroom and students hurriedly close down a window, Control, Shift, and T brings back up the last window they had open. And again, that just gives staff a bit more confidence to feel that they can cope with the change that they're dealing with. And we also looked at how we can project a power onto the whiteboard. So as the teacher's moving around the room, they can see what's on any individual student's screen at a glance. Our infrastructure upgrades began over the holidays. The SNUP, the network upgrade project, was completed over the holidays. We joined Network for Learning, and we made a move to KMAR as a student management system as well. So it was a very busy time. Chris, at this point, are there any questions that you want to interject with?
So the only question that has kind of floated to my mind, I don't know if you want to answer this now or maybe later, was this idea of what would you do differently? Because you mentioned that, you know, you have been one of the pioneers of getting Chromebooks and getting an outside provider to actually do the supplying of those Chromebooks. I don't know if you want to answer that now, what you would do differently, or later, up to you.
I was going to mention it later, but now is good. It's a very pertinent question. What I would do is make sure that I had every detail thought through and documented with the supplier. It's taken us 3 years now, and we're in a bit more of a comfortable place. But knowing exactly who's going to do what, like who's going to put the console management licenses on them, are the parents going to pick up the devices from the supplier, or are they going to be delivered to the school? How are we as a school going to get the information out on how students log in and get on the network? all of those sorts of little details lead to a few problems. But the main one in our first 2 years was getting the right number of devices. And we found 2 years on the trot that the supplier had said, yeah, we'll get you 180 Chromebooks. And then when it came to the crunch, they maybe got 120, and we had parents and students wanting to get the Chromebooks and couldn't get the devices at the time. So it led to hold-ups, which really didn't make the process as smooth as it could have been. Does that answer that question, Chris?
Yeah, that's great. I do have another question, but again, I want you to answer them when you're in the when you're at the right point. But Tony's interested, and I think absolutely. I think if I'm interpreting Tony's question right, he says he's very interested in student agency and teacher control of the Chromebooks compared with BYOD. So I guess that idea of Hapara, Big Brother, the ability to look at kids' screens versus BYOD or all Chromebooks with sharp ends. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an ongoing dilemma, and we've got some staff who really want to be able to feel like they're in control. But as a college and and the leadership team in the college, we are very aware that I think the way forwards, and it'll become apparent later on, is more around educating the students in what's appropriate. So I might say more about that a little bit later, if that's okay, just where it kind of fits in with the grand scheme of things. But if there's anything that I gloss over or miss out, then flag it up to me again, and I'll go into more detail there.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug.
Cool. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Chris. So in 2015, we just finished the network upgrade, and we had a few issues around that. There was pretty decent Wi-Fi access across the college, still some black spots, but there were also some issues around the legislative and practical problems in handover from the network upgrade project to Norcom, particularly around being able to make our own changes to the filtering. And so that took a couple of months to kind of get right. And in the interim, it would take us maybe 2 weeks to say, hey, we'd like this done. And then it would get held up before we could get that change made. So now we're at a stage where we can, make any changes instantly. One of my jobs was to rewrite the acceptable use policy. It's still a bit lengthy, and it currently represents really a bureaucratic step rather than an educational opportunity. So the Chromebooks arrived. The vast majority of parents brought their Chromebooks in on time, ready to get the console management license installed. Noel Leeming, as I said, didn't provide the promised number of devices, and so that was a bit of a dilemma. The other problem was the ordering of the console licenses. So we didn't have enough devices, nor did we have enough console licenses. And that meant some really frustrating delays and some debate about who had to enroll the console management on the devices. So the big rollout eventually happened. Year 9s were ushered into the hall one day to collect the devices and be shown how to log in and to sign the policy. We did it in alphabetical order, and a few key staff helped this run relatively smoothly. We still had some students without devices that needed to be followed up on, and our foundation provided half or full cost of the Chromebook to families that requested financial aid. In retrospect, all of those things probably would have helped, probably would have been gone smoother if it was one person's priority rather than juggling between a few people. I've also heard that Work and Income New Zealand provided some funding at another Wellington secondary school. And so if I was to go through the process again, I'd probably pursue that as an option to support some of our poorer families. We had some problems with passwords, getting the characters easily recognizable. And there's still some technical support issues occasionally that I feel I need to double check before I can say with confidence that they've been fixed. And we had Karen, our librarian, lead every tutor group through a session that introduced them to Google and what they could do with that. Our digital citizenship program began, and this was an interdepartmental responsibility of Karen in the library, RE, social studies, and English. And it's a living document. It changes every year, and new ideas being put into it and constantly being evaluated. I do feel that it's got a lot of value, and it's really important for the learning of the students in this day and age. So by this point, Google Classroom had taken off throughout the college, and it's just brilliant. It's great to be able now to introduce other teachers or student teachers into your class. And we use it within my department, so I can kind of see what other people are doing with theirs, and it often gives me great ideas, and I steal ideas from my colleagues to throw into my classes. So ultimately the students are benefiting. The latest feature to update parents is potentially very powerful, and we're playing about with that now. And the ability to reuse posts became it changed my life for 1 week a year when I go away for the volleyball nationals. Just being able to reuse posts, so I can go back and find the work that was done around the same time last year, tweak it and put it up again. And so if there's something particularly useful, it's often quicker just to go back into a previous class from another year, and then to reuse the post in my current year's classroom. The challenge with Google Classroom is probably getting students to engage initially, and so you can come up with some really, some ideas just in short, playful ways to get students using the stream and posting on there. I asked them to go onto Google Earth and find images of wave patterns on coastlines for level 2 physics, and get them to post those, and nobody's allowed to post the same one as anybody else, and it just gets them on there. Another one is weird genetic diseases in level 1 science, and the boys get quite excited about finding stuff that's really weird or unusual and posting that. We continued staff training on KMAR and on Chromebooks and other Google apps. We ran into some security concerns, practical ones, around the devices. They were largely solved by giving Year 9s first dibs on lockers, so they had somewhere to put the device when they weren't, when they were doing PE. We've improved the cameras throughout the college, and that helped solve a number of theft issues. But the most common theme is a student claiming to have the device stolen, and then it turning out to have been misplaced. Student carelessness on that regard is probably it's easily the most frequent cause of damage to devices or loss of devices. The classic one is putting the earphones on the keyboard and then closing the lid, which damages the screens, and that is about 80% of the issues that we've had to deal with over the last few years. We did have an issue with guest access, and made the decision to block guest access because it meant that students weren't accountable as easily for their actions. But there was 2 schools of thought on that, and I'm not convinced that we've necessarily made the best decision based on it being a student-owned device. And if somebody else in their family wanted to get onto that device at the time, it was really only either the student's login or a guest login. But I think we've got that sorted now. Both the families and students and the staff are much happier with it. It does highlight, just to go back up to a point, sorry, that highlights the need to have a system in place for monitoring the state of devices and to initiate repairs. We find that if there's not, if the staff aren't keeping an eye on whether the students are bringing the devices, damage can happen, and it can be months before the students, anybody asks the student, well, where's your Chromebook? And they, say, oh, it's broken, it's just sitting under my bed. And we have to push them to, follow the process to go and get it repaired. But we've got a really smooth system, and that works well now. Despite my initial misgivings, we joined the Wellington Loop. It was originally a network of schools that benefited from fibre. The focus now has shifted to inter-school collaboration and networking. The annual Loop Ed PD days are really awesome, and we get a whole load of schools collapse their day and meet together in one venue. And there's a whole range of workshops that people can choose from. But the biggest benefit has probably been 70 hours of facilitators' time that we get each year, and they can come into the school and work with the whole school, departments or individuals. Membership to the Loop also covered website redevelopment and the school app, which has been used by us. Google Sites were promoted by one department, and they did a great job of it, and then encouraged the senior leadership team to make it mandatory for other departments. Now, this decision maybe wasn't the wisest in retrospect. It wasn't based on the needs of individual departments, and so we chose this appearance of uniformity rather than actually asking why we were using it. Some departments lack the expertise or the desire to implement it. You know, it's one thing to be told you have to have a Google site, but another entirely to buy into the idea and to do a decent job that benefits the students and is frequently updated. We shifted the focus of our appraisal towards teaching as inquiry, with emphasis on digital pedagogy. Google Docs permeated another level of our school, replacing our traditional appraisal documents, and this was much better for linking evidence and updating your document on the go at one of our monthly morning professional criteria group discussions. It's also handy for completing observation forms digitally, such as, you know, taking a photo on my phone during a PE observation, or including a photo to help a teacher consider where they are positioning themselves while they're teaching. Of huge importance was the greater emphasis on sharing of ideas. Staff were using Google Slides to publicly present on their inquiry, and then some were selected to present to the whole staff. At the start of term 3, we joined NetNZ's online tuition program for a number of our scholarship subjects. It was our first venture into video conferencing for education. We also use Hangouts for some meetings, both within the school and across, you know, with other schools. One of the big issues that we've had to deal with, September that year, BrowseSec, it's a VPN that means that students can circumvent our security. We found out about it and we blocked the one we knew about using the management console, but I'll come back to this later. Towards the end of the year, we reconsidered providers for, you know, the next rollout of Chromebooks, and we decided better the devil you know. So we went with no Leeming again. And around about this time, we had a Year 9 class, top band of Year 9, but they ended up engaging with a digital learning sequence for a level 2 physics internal, and the results they got were awesome. You know, for such a young group of kids, they were interested in radioactivity and learning about nuclear physics. So we gave them the opportunity, and they ended up, all bar one of them, I think, secured the credits, and a lot of them managed to succeed at excellence and merit level, and that was a real point of pride for those boys, and something that that seemed to work really well and challenge a few perceptions. Over the holidays, we had a lot of upgrades, hardware upgrades. There was new PCs, a trolley with the iPad 2s we decided to maintain it, but the operating system can't be updated now, and the security is a bit vulnerable. Because the iPads are 3 times the cost of the Chromebook, we really, you know, we've been phasing out the iPads, and we have to individually, we have to book our Norcom's time over the holidays to update the iPads individually, whereas with the Chromebooks, we can just do it, you know, through the console management license with a touch of a button. Chris, is there anything that you'd like to flag up at this stage?
There are just a couple of quick questions. One from Tony, and he was just talking about your video conferencing preference, whether it's Adobe or Skype or Hangouts.
Hangouts is probably the one that we've moved to. I still use Skype if I'm talking to my folks or what have you back in the UK, but Hangouts tends to be what we use within the school.
And also from Liana, do you continue to use Hapara today for document sharing and management rather than control?
Say that last bit again, sorry.
So do you use Hapara today for document sharing and management? But I think, as you've actually said, you use Classroom now.
Yeah, we do still use both, and some staff are maybe more comfortable with Hapara, but I'd say that the vast majority, when I asked them at the beginning of the year just to demonstrate, you know, how far we've come in a short space of time, the whole staff, when I asked, you know, who's using Google Classroom, it was just a wave of hands. I think everybody is using Google Classroom. Some people still use Hapara, but not so much for sharing the documents. Some of them use it for differentiating groups. and it's predominantly used for being aware of what students are doing anytime. And the really cool trick there is putting it up, is projecting that Hapara screen so that the students start to become a bit more responsible for themselves. They know that what they're doing is visible, and that way the teacher doesn't feel trapped behind their desk, looking at that little screen. They can be roaming around and really focusing on the education of learners rather than managing what's going on and reprimanding students for gaming or whatever. Does that cover that one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great to move on now.
Cool. We got a new laptop trolley just coming into the start of 2016 for senior subjects, and this really was driven by the changing style of assessment, particularly in maths with statistics, and scholarship physics class made a lot of use out of those as well. We eliminated tablets that were presenting a security risk, and again, gradual reduction of iPads. We moved to using from the Chromebook trolley to something called PC locks, which is like a shopping basket style for device carriers. They're about $27 each, and it made it really easy to transport the Chromebooks around the college because we now had complete Wi-Fi coverage. And these are, you'd see these moving to and from classes all the time throughout the college. We can also now, students who don't have devices on any given day, go and borrow a Chromebook. And it's probably worth saying that when they do that, we record the reason why they haven't got their Chromebook, and then just keep an eye on any patterns. So if a student hasn't brought theirs 3 days in a row, then we start asking questions and get in touch with the parents just to figure out what's going on there and whether we need to give them a helping hand in terms of getting something repaired. So the second wave of Chromebooks went ahead. Noel Leeming ran out of Chromebooks again. The console management license ran better, but we still didn't get all at the right time. And then that had implications for us paying Norcom to enroll the devices. My advice for others would be to build these points explicitly into the contract. And there's obviously a great need to really cross your T's and dot your I's just to making sure that everything's explicit. We had some concerns over written skills by a number of departments raised through their department reports with the Year 9s that have been on Chromebooks. And we instigated Device-Free Friday in the library. So we see a lot of students on Chromebooks at every opportunity. And so the library decided actually to get back to some older methods of socializing. And so if you go up to the library at lunchtime, it's filled with people playing cards, chess, board games. We've got Lego up there now. It's a really good space. We ran the digital citizenship for parents evening again, and it highlighted how many parents were really worried about how to manage their devices at home, the students' devices at home, how long to allow them, etc. And so that gave us an opportunity to really help the parents feel more confident and remind them that ultimately, they were in charge of the devices at home. It was theirs, they'd paid for it. And to give the parents the confidence to say, actually, I'm going to turn off the router if I don't think you're using your Chromebook appropriately, or, controlling the hours that their son, in our case, was on the device. Yeah, it was quite interesting to see what the parent concerns were from that point of view. And getting the parents on board overlaps with the, Hattie's research that I think Chris mentioned earlier, around getting teachers involved in, little workshops of what their sons or children are doing at school. By this time in 2016, I'd really noticed a massive shift in terms of where our staff were at. And this was shown by a lot of our staff having the confidence to then present in front of others at the Loop. We had teachers trying a whole load of new strategies with a noticeable impact on student engagement. We had art gallery style presentations, a living health and safety doc, vastly greater capabilities in staff and students. Digital reporting was now entrenched, and more effort to engage with the community through surveys, course selection evenings. We had a spreadsheet example assisting reporting, learning analysis, and collaboration moderation as well involved in there. Now I could talk about this initiative for far longer, but I need to watch my time. This, what you can see on screen now, is a spreadsheet, and using that Google Sheet, we really get the students involved far more in being able to mark their own work, and their understanding of the concepts they've learned or that they need to brush up on has come on leaps and bounds through using this. Okay, so security issues were encountered again. So the VPN issue raised its head. BrowseSec was on there. There'd been so we blocked one URL, but students just very quickly found another one. And so we blocked that, and within 24 hours, the students were on something called Windscribe, which used tunneling, and we couldn't block it just as easily as we had with BrowseSec. We made a decision to go down the avenue of educating the students rather than controlling their use. And we spoke to all of the boys in assembly and said, look, the device is there for your learning, and you need to be using that device responsibly. The next day, the number of users that we saw in the classrooms and throughout the college had dropped away. The number of users of Windscribe had dropped away dramatically. And so while I wasn't confident it was going to, it really seemed to, talking to the students made a difference. And then it was just targeting a few recalcitrants rather than the majority. The Fortinet was overloaded with filtering. It was another issue we had, and the choice was between control or responsible use. We decided to reduce the filtering and focus on students managing their use themselves. We also had some issues with the number of connections that our Aero hives could manage, because we had far more devices. And I will say here that the big issue we're dealing with now is around that. And if students are on with a Chromebook, that counts as one connection. But if a student's also on with a phone, that counts as another connection. And so if we've got an Aero hive shared between two classes, potentially 60 students, that can only manage 80 connections, we're dealing with a problem where students on the Chromebooks can't always get on because a lot of students are on with their phones. So that's just maybe something to be aware of. Haven't got a solution to that one yet. Our Year 9s engaged in a project-based trial at this stage in 2016, and it just blows my mind how they performed. They did an incredible job of using Google Apps to coordinate and run an induction day for incoming Year 8 students. They took over all of the planning, the roles, the activities, the leadership, communications with feeder schools, transport and execution. And it was just an incredible day, seeing what they were capable of doing. And that was a real success. And they used sheets, they used forms, they used email, Gmail. It was pretty incredible to watch. Everything seemed to be going so well, but suddenly our systems died, and it was about 2 weeks after Pokemon Go was launched, and we realized again that the Fortinet wasn't cutting it with the number of students that were using their other devices to play Pokemon Go. And so at this stage, we cut the FortiGate back quite severely, and didn't really have much in the way of filtering to avoid inappropriate content at this stage. Online learning continued through NetNZ, but we also offered some other digital courses such as the Science 101 through Victoria University. And the Board of Trustees asked for a 5-year IT plan, which is just really bizarre, because looking at the changes over the last 3 years, you can't predict what's going to happen that far ahead. All right, so I'm pleased to say that third time lucky, the Chromebook launch was way smoother. Console management license was preloaded by no leaming. Parents collect the devices from no leaming over the holidays, and it's an easy transition into school. We don't need to just distribute devices to students within school, and as soon as they arrive, they can be on the network and doing what they need to be doing. We use a Google Sheet to maintain an up-to-date communication between no leaming and ourselves, and that works really well. So we're both aware at any time, like how many devices have been collected and paid for, and then we can be chasing up those that haven't. With the concerns around writing, we've instigated a whole school PD using a team called Write That Essay. We'll see how that goes. And we are investigating or trialing something called Content Keeper. As soon as we put this in, this is another hardware unit that doesn't deal with the, managing the Wi-Fi side of things like the FortiGate does, but it's dedicated to dealing with content. And as soon as we put it in and turned it on, it actually did a much better job straight away of preventing students from using VPNs and from finding inappropriate content. Now, the really exciting thing about this, and that I'm working to try and get sorted now, is that we can apparently offer that same level of protection to parents when the student device is at home. So, hopefully more on that down the line. But we are setting that up to test, and I know that parents are really excited about that because they don't necessarily feel that they've got the skills to feel that they're protecting their children. Hapara now talks with Kmart, which saves a lot of time and hassle in setting up the digital class groups at the start of the year and when we change over timetables halfway through the year. And our latest hiccup has been updating multiple different generations of AeroHive, and that seems to have caused quite a few network failures which get in the way of smooth running. So that is, I guess, up to where we are now. Chris, do you want to fire in with anything here?
I think we'll just come through to the end if that's all right, Doug, and then there's a couple of questions, but we'll deal with them once you've finished.
Absolutely. I'd love to run this, but Chris tells me that I don't think the video will necessarily work in Hangouts. So there's a URL there, and this was collected at the end of last year from some of our Year 9s, just about what their feelings around the Chromebooks were, what some of the distractions are, the whole pros and cons of using Chromebooks. And I've got to say, it makes me smile every time I see these guys talking about their use of the devices and what's important to them. So I'd recommend, it's about 4 or 5 minutes long. If you're interested in student device, then go and grab that.
I've also put the link to that. The link to that video is also under the video in the YouTube channel, so everyone's got a link to that there.
Superb. So for us, reflecting and looking ahead, have we made the right decision? I often get asked, going with Chromebooks versus, a more open BYOD policy. I've got to say that having the Chromebooks works for us. We know what we can expect the student device to be able to do. The staff feel confident that what they're doing is going to work on any student's device. And I know that some other schools in the area that went with a more open BYOD policy have kind of found big issues with that further down the line. So I'm really pleased with what we've done, and it seems to be working at this stage anyway. We're constantly reviewing teaching and learning and how we can best use the devices and push staff and student expertise to enhance what we're doing. We're shifting the assessment format towards more digital assessment, and that's really exciting, but it also comes with a whole load of problems. We do want to be shifting towards responsible use rather than controlling the use, but at the same time I think we need to offer a certain level of care over what students can access, especially because between Year 9 and Year 13 students' maturity can change quite drastically, and from individuals within any of those ages. What we've done has highlighted the need to involve the wider community. Involving parents is really crucial, and it pays dividends. So I guess we've tried a lot of things, and I don't think we failed. We found a lot of ways that don't work, but moving forwards, it's really exciting, and it's great to see what's going on around the college on a day-to-day basis. And just to finish up, here's a few of the different tools that staff have found that we have made good use of throughout the college. Thanks very much for listening. I think that's all I've got. At this stage, I'm happy to hand over to any questions.
I think you are getting a virtual round of applause from the people who are in here. So thank you so much for that, Doug. If I can just grab back the screen from you.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. Here we go. Thanks, mate.
Do you have that now?
There's a couple of things that we're going to have. I do, yeah, we're good. So a few questions, and I'm just going to answer one of them, and then I'm going to throw the rest to you if that's all right. Tony asks about locking them down for external online exams. Now, there is in terms of locking down Chromebooks, there is absolutely a way to. I know, obviously, in New Zealand, your assessment system, it said, and in Australia, we're trialing online exams, so we're trialing online NAPLAN testing, and Chromebooks can absolutely be locked down to the management console into kiosk mode, which means we can actually say at Tuesday 9 o'clock until 11 o'clock, the only thing that can be accessed on these Chromebooks is the NAPLAN test or whatever. So yeah, absolutely, we can do that. But I've got a few more specific questions for you. And actually, I think I'll put the link to the support article on using Chromebooks for external exams into the chat. But just a couple of questions. There's lots of questions, so I'm going to try to read them as I go. So Stella is asking about formal assessment and reporting, and anything that you use in terms of Chromebooks or G Suite.
So formal assessment and reporting.
Hang on, sorry, Doug. I just read the last bit of that question. I didn't. It was in 3 parts. So about formal assessment reporting, Stella's actually, she said, is in security-wise, would you be confident? So I guess it's a very secure system. We can lock it down, etc., etc.
I guess. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to answer what Stella's asking, but we use KMAR for our reporting parent portal, but we're also inviting a lot of parents into Google Classroom, and I think they then get a weekly summary of what's going on Classroom. And I'm really happy to share student work with parents, and it's just if the students aren't doing something right, parents know that they're going to muck around occasionally and make mistakes, and it makes the students up their game. If they've got an audience, if they know that somebody else is going to see their work, then it really transforms what they put into things.
Absolutely. We've answered Tony's question. Liana, I'll jump on and answer this if that's okay. How do you utilize Chromebooks for subjects that need specific software like Photoshop and CorelDRAW? So there are 2 kind of answers to that. There are lots of Chrome-based apps. For example, one which is very, very similar to Photoshop is Pixlr, Pixlr.com, and that links to Google Drive. So when you create your artwork in Pixlr, and you have very similar tools in there, you have the sponge tool and the selection tools, very, very similar to Photoshop. Probably not as deep, but it certainly can do multiple layers and things like that, and links into your Drive. But something that is coming out and is starting to roll out through Chromebooks are the Android apps within Chromebooks. So in the new generation of Chromebooks, the vast majority of which are actually touchscreen, you will be able to access the Google Play Android store. So you can get the CorelDRAW app or the Photoshop app that you would normally use on a tablet on a touchscreen Chromebook. So it really is an interesting way to tackle that problem. And I've just been playing on that today, actually, using a touchscreen Chromebook with some apps, and I used Explain Everything, and that was such a good tool on a tablet, but even more powerful on my Chromebook. So yeah.
Just on that note, if I can, Chris, we deliberately picked a model of Chromebook that had the Android apps enabled. That was a key decision. Towards the end of last year, we do have at the senior end, we've got a laptop trolley for specific stuff that the senior subjects might require, and we do have a Mac lab for some of the the tech and the music side of things. But increasingly, at 9 years, 9, 10, and 11, we find that the Chromebooks meet the needs of what our departments and students want and need.
Absolutely. There was a question from Vanessa about can you restrict access to certain content for various grades? Yeah, you certainly can. You can within the Chrome Management Console and within the G Suite admin, you can create organizational units. So you can put year 7, for example, into one unit, or year 7, 8, and 9 into one unit, however you want to organize it, senior schools, and you can put all of the really granular level controls over what the kids can access, what they can do by organizational unit. So if you were a K-12 school, you guys have 13, up to 13, don't you, like in the UK? So if you guys are all the way up to year 13, right from the tiny tots, you can have different organizational units for a very, very granular level. So absolutely, we can do that. And you have lots of thank yous, which is always good. Well, listen, I think we're coming to the end of our time, Doug. I'm just going to screen share it for a second while I thank you. Hang on, there we go. So if I just jump on here, and my thank you here. So a couple of things. I love the fact that Doug has spent this time, warts and all. It's always great to have those innovators and those people who are doing things early in terms of early adoption, so that they can work through the hard stuff, and then they're kind enough to share it with us. And there are lots of things that you might think, yeah, I've learned from that, and definitely I have. I do want to thank Doug. Get on and make sure you follow him on Twitter at Flying Douglas, and email. He has kindly put his email on here, so I'm sure he'll be inundated now with emails. I did just want to quickly tell you that in the links under the YouTube channel, you've got a link to the video that Doug mentioned about his students talking about their experience of working with Chromebooks at St. Patrick's. There is an evaluation form, which is very, very useful. And we would love you to fill in that really short evaluation form so we know we're on the right track when we're running webinars. And there's a link to the graphic organizer activity. And there's also a link to this, not this, this is just a screenshot, but there's a link to the Chromebook pilot guide. So if you're really interested, after what Doug's talked about tonight, to move on and really go for piloting Chromebooks, whether it's a small scale pilot or whether you want to jump in there and go for a full rollout, there's a wonderful guide which is available from Google, edu.google.com/au, sorry, .au/indul/en_au/IT. I'm sure you've all remembered it, but it is in the YouTube description under the video. Please do fill in the feedback and feed forward form for us. It is very, very useful. We do appreciate it. And I just want to say one more opportunity to thank Doug. And just to give him a couple of, sorry, let me just skip across here, Doug, so I can see you. Just to give you a couple of, I think people might not have seen my screen then. It's okay, it's all in the description underneath the YouTube channel. But some things that people have said are, Liana, thank you, very helpful answers. This is awesome and really, really useful. PD at home, he says. So sitting there comfortably watching some PD. And then Scott says, thanks for your openness. Thank your principal for me too, please. That's really nice.
I shall. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
So thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Doug, for sharing your expertise with us. Don't forget to, you will be receiving an email to sign up for the following or the next bunch of webinars. And thank you for spending your time with us this evening/afternoon. Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thank you. See you guys.